Okay, freedom of criticism. What does freedom of criticism mean? Okay, so if y'all are new here, I just went on live on Instagram for a little bit. I told everybody that I was going to be reading from What Is to Be Done by Lenin. We will not get through the whole pamphlet today as I have 45 minutes. But these are the 4 points. The main thing that you need to take from What Is to Be Done by Lenin is that he strongly argues that we need a extremely disciplined, organized, and professional vanguard party that can help direct the masses towards revolution. It's kind of like what I was saying on my live. We can arm a bunch of people and give everybody, but what are they going to do with it? What's the purpose? How do they know when and how and what and who and why to use it? You know what I mean? So it's this trade union versus socialist consciousness that we're going to discuss. So trade union would be like better wages, better working conditions, your bread and butter, if you will. And the socialist consciousness expands on that. It kind of zooms out and looks at the broader struggle, like the more broad struggle against capitalism as a whole. And then the rejection of spontaneity. So like political consciousness must be brought to them from without so that workers develop from day-to-day economic battle. So again, it kind of ties into what I was just saying, that trade union mindset versus socialist consciousness. And political struggle over economic struggle. So the movement is to go beyond improving working conditions and focus on political agitation against the state and combating opportunism. So like back then they called economists, the critics, the wannabe Marxists, the opportunists. They want changes, they want to be called Marxists, but they want to reform, they want to venture off, they want to go off into the marshes. And Lenin's like, dude, no, we hold hands, we lock in together, we go in the same direction. If you want to venture off and be an opportunist and, you want to go give in to the bourgeois reforms, go ahead. But you're not going to take us down with you. You know what I mean? And then lastly, we have the role of theory. So if you don't understand the scientific method of Marxism, if you don't understand, you're not going to have a revolutionary movement. You need to understand, you need to have a scientific understanding of Marxism in order to have a revolutionary movement. Okay, so there's like 15 of y'all in here. Great. I'm going to go ahead and start reading. Now, please know that you could also go online for free and you could go to Marxist.org and you could type in What Is to Be Done by Lenin, and you could also read along with me. All right, I'm going to get started. So, what does freedom of criticism mean? Freedom of criticism is undoubtedly the most fashionable slogan at the present time, and the one most frequently employed in the controversies between socialists and Democrats in all countries. At first sight, nothing would appear to be more strange than the solemn appeals to freedom of criticism made by one of the parties to the dispute. Have voices been raised in the advanced parties against the constitutional law of the majority of European countries, which guarantees freedom to science and scientific investigation? Something must be wrong here, will be the comment of the onlooker who has heard this fashionable slogan repeated at every turn, but has not yet penetrated the essence of the disagreement among the disputants. Evidently, the slogan is one of the conventional phrases which, like nicknames, become legitimized by use and become almost generic terms. So basically what he means here is he's like, yeah, the opportunists, the critics, that wanted to, go, they're like, we want freedom of criticism. Yeah, you want freedom of criticism so that you can revise socialism, so that you can revise, the state. And Lenin's like, no, we're not doing that. I see what you guys are doing. And we try to learn from history, right? In fact, it is no secret for anyone that two trends have taken form in present-day international social democracy. The conflict between these trends now flares up in a bright flame and now dies down and smolders under the ashes of imposing truce resolutions. There's another one for you. The essence of the new trend, which adopts a critical attitude towards obsolete dogmatic Marxism, has been clearly enough presented by Bernstein and demonstrated by Millerand. So Bernstein is a reformist, okay? If you don't know who Bernstein is, we don't like Bernstein. Anytime you hear me say Bernstein, just know that Lenin is roasting his ass, okay? Social democracy must change from a party of social revolution into a democratic party of social reforms. Bernstein has surrounded this political demand with a whole battery of well-attuned new arguments and reasonings. A bunch of bullshit, a bunch of excuses, a bunch of siding with the power, Denied was the possibility of putting socialism on a scientific basis and of demonstrating its necessity and inevitability from the point of view of the materialist conception of history. Denied was the fact of growing impoverishment. So he's like, listen, we gotta abandon Bernstein because this fool is gonna lead you down. Like, he's not gonna let you have a socialist, attitude on a scientific basis of demonstrating the necessity and inevitability from the point of view of the materialist conception of history. And he's gonna deny that there's impoverishment. The process of proletarianization and the intensification of capitalist contradictions, the very concept, ultimate aim, was declared to be unsound, and the idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat was completely rejected. So yeah, y'all, we can't listen to that bullshit. And guess what? Liberals today are fucking Bernsteinians. They don't want to give up their comfort. They want to be badass fucking communists and Marxists and leftists, blah. But they don't want to put in the work. They don't want to think. They don't want to, like Lenin says, they don't want to look at the large, broader, struggle. This ain't about paying yourself more. This ain't about enriching your workplace, making shit better. Yes, that is a part of it, but it can't stop there, or else what? Reform after reform, new fucking, whitewash bullshit coming through. Like, we can't have that. So denied was the theory of class struggle on the alleged grounds that it could not be applied to a strictly democratic society governed according to the will of the majority. What's up, everybody? I guess you don't tap the screen on YouTube, but if you're able to share it, comment, all the things, please do. Okay, so here we go. Thus, the demand for a decisive turn from revolutionary social democracy to bourgeois social reformism was accompanied by no less decisive turn towards bourgeois criticism of all the fundamental ideas of Marxism. So again, these people, they want to be Marxists. They want to be all about, people getting equal, equitable rights, all this stuff, but not really though, because if you're not allowed, if these people don't allow, they want the freedom of the criticism, but they want it for their rulers or for themselves. I can't repeat this enough. They're not willing to look at the broader struggle, which Lenin argues all throughout this pamphlet. That is the main thing. Sorry that I'm not a Marxist scholar, y'all. I'm not an intellectual. Like, this is me giving it my best shot to try to make it, intelligible, understandable to like average person, so please forgive me. And also feel free to interject in the chat and correct me. Okay. To proceed, if Bernstein's theoretical criticism and political yearnings were still unclear to anyone, the French took the trouble strikingly to demonstrate the new method. In this instance, too, France has justified its old reputation of being the land where more than anywhere else the historical class struggles were each time fought out to a decision. So the French are intolerable. The Germans are the good little boys and girls. That's what Lenin says. We'll get to that part. But at least the French were like, fuck you. We'll struggle until we get to this understanding. And the French were like, nah, we'll go with the reforms. What is my channel about? Well, if you go in my bio, you can see what my channel is about. But today we're just reading What Is to Be Done by Lenin. As I look at the conditions, the climate here, with Epstein files being released, with more genocides popping up, like, I just feel like now more than ever, let's bring some revolutionary optimism. Let's look at what, some of these revolutionary people, leaders in history have said and have predicted about these times that we are up against right now. Okay. The French socialists have begun not to theorize, but to act. The democratically more highly developed political conditions in France have permitted them to put Bernsteinism into practice immediately with all its consequences. Yeah, imagine the consequences of removing the science of Marxism and just all these reforms while calling it Marxism. Just imagine what those type of consequences would be. An excellent example of practical Bernsteinism. Not without reason did Bernstein and Volmar rush so zealously to defend him and laud him. Indeed, if social democracy in essence is merely a party of reform and must be bold enough to admit this openly, then not only has a socialist the right to join a bourgeois cabinet, but he must always strive to do so. If democracy, in essence, means the abolition of class domination, then why should not a socialist minister charm the whole bourgeois world by orations on class collaborations? Communism is not the revolution you want? Who's this fucking chud? Get lost, Killa QB. The fuck are you doing in here? Bye. Put user in timeout for a day. See ya. Don't get in the way of my fucking proxies, okay? Don't get in the way of what I'm doing here. I do not take kindly to that. Kindly go fuck off. I'm working. Do I come to your job and tell you what to do at your job? Do I come to your place of work and say, oh no, we don't do that here? No, I do not. Okay. If democracy in essence means the abolition of class domination, then why should not a socialist minister charm the whole bourgeois world by orations on class collaboration? Why should he not remain in the cabinet even after the shooting down of workers by gendarmes has exposed for the 100th and 1000th time the real nature of the democratic collaboration of classes? Why should he not personally take part in greeting the Tsar, for whom the French socialists have no other name than hero of the gallows? And the reward for this utter humiliation and self-degradation of socialism in the face of the whole world, for the corruption of the socialist consciousness of the working class, the only basis that can guarantee our victory, the reward for this is pompous projects for miserable reforms. So miserable, in fact, that much more has been obtained from bourgeois governments. So that's how much this fool is against these, opportunists, this Bernsteinism, this reform, these economists, these we want freedom of criticism. He's like, fuck out of here. More has been obtained from bourgeois governments than your wishy-washy bullshit trying to call yourself a Marxist. Okay? Here we go. Dogmatism and freedom of criticism. Are y'all still with me? Okay. He who does not deliberately close his eyes cannot fail to see that the new critical trend in socialism is nothing more nor less than a new variety of opportunism. And if we judge people not by the glittering uniforms they don, or by the high-sounding appellations they give themselves, but by their actions and by what they actually advocate. So again, we don't judge people based on, oh, you're like this great guy, you're like this great dad, you're this great mom, like, oh, you're this great, like, no, we judge people based on their role in society. What are your actions? You know, what do you advocate for? What are you about as a whole? Communism in itself zooms out from the individual and focuses on the masses. So if you cannot do that, or you are unwilling, or you don't want to, or you don't see the value in it, immediate gulag, jail. You know, you're going to get lost in the marsh of all the reforms, and your ass is going to be left high and dry. Okay. Freedom is a grand word, but under the banner of freedom for industry, the most predatory wars were waged. Under the banner of freedom of labor, the working people were robbed. The modern use of the term freedom of criticism contains the same inherent falsehood. Those who are really convinced that they have made progress in science would not demand freedom for the new views to continue side by side with the old, but the substitution of the new views for the old. The cry heard today, long live freedom of criticism, is too strongly reminiscent of the fable of the empty barrel. We are marching in a compact group along a precipitous and difficult path, firmly holding each other hand by hand. We are surrounded on all sides by enemies, and we had to advance almost constantly under their fire. We have combined by a freely adopted decision for the purpose of fighting the enemy and not retreating into the neighboring marsh. Exactly. You got to keep it P. Don't be no fucking pussy. Be like, I want to go over there. I can't do this. No. Okay? We are marching in a compact group. We know it's difficult. We're going to firmly hold each other's hand. We know we're surrounded by enemies. We know we have to advance almost constantly under their fire. Okay? We have combined by a freely adopted decision for the purpose of fighting the enemy and not of retreating into the neighboring marsh, the inhabitants of which from the very outset have reproached us with having separated ourselves in an exclusive group and with having chosen the path of struggle instead of the path of conciliation, aka reform. And now some among us begin to cry out, let us go into the marsh. And when we begin to shame them, they retort, what backward people you are. Are you not ashamed to deny us a liberty to invite you out to take a better road? Oh yes, gentlemen, you are free not only to invite us, but to go yourselves wherever you will, even into the marsh. In fact, we think the marsh is your proper place, and we are prepared to render you every assistance to get there. Only let go of our hands, don't clutch at us, and don't besmirch the grand word freedom, for we are too free to go where we please, free to fight, not only against the marsh, but also against those who are turning towards the marsh. They're traitors, they're cowards, they're pussies, you know what I mean? Okay. The new advocates of freedom of criticism. Is it possible to unite the social democratic organizations operating abroad? For a durable unity, there must be freedom of criticism. From this statement, two definite conclusions follow. Robespierre Diallo has taken under its wing the opportunist trend in international social democracy in general, and that demands freedom for opportunism in Russian social democracy. Let us examine these conclusions. Okay, I'm not going to read that. Okay, this determined defense of the most pronounced Bernsteinians is not supported by any argument or reasoning whatsoever. Apparently, the author believes that if he repeats what his most pronounced Bernsteinians say about themselves, his assertion requires no proof. But can anything be more shallow, be imagined than this judgment of an entire trend based on nothing more than what the representatives of that trend say about themselves? Can anything more shallow be imagined? On the two different and even diametrically opposed types or paths of party development, the German Social Democrats, in other words, recognize complete freedom of criticism, but the French do not, and it is precisely their example that demonstrates the bane of intolerance. To this, we can only say that the very example Krzyzewski affords us attests to the fact, to the name Marxist is at times assumed by people who conceive history literally in the Ilovaisky, I'm sure I'm not saying that right, manner, to explain the unity of the German Socialist Party and the disunity of the French Socialist Party. There is no need whatever to go into the special features in the history of these countries to contrast the conditions of military semi-absolutism in the one with Republican parliamentarism, and the other to analyze the effects of the Paris Commune and the effects of the exceptional law against the socialists, to compare the economic life and economic development of the two countries, or to recall that the unexampled growth of German social democracy was accompanied by a strenuous struggle, unique in the history of socialism, not only against erroneous theories, but also against erroneous tactics. Lassalle. All that is superfluous. The French quarrel among themselves because they are intolerant. The Germans are united because they are good boys. And observe, this piece of matchless profundity is designed to refute the fact that puts to rout the defense of the Bernsteinians. The question whether or not the Bernsteinians stand on the basis of class struggle of the proletariat is one that can be completely and irrevocably answered only by historical experience. So no, he's just writing real sassy over here, using so many words to be sassy. Consequently, the example of France holds the greatest significance in this respect, because France is the only country in which the Bernsteinians attempted to stand independently on their own feet with the warm approval of their German colleagues. The reference to the intolerance of the French, apart from its historical significance, turns out to be merely an attempt to hush up very unpleasant facts with angry invectives. Nor are we inclined to make a present of the Germans to Krzyzewski and the numerous other champions of freedom of criticism if the most pronounced Bernsteinians are still tolerated in the ranks of the German party. It is only to the extent that they submit the Hanover Resolution. That contains a direct warning. Okay, and to the Lubeck resolution, which contains a direct warning to Bernstein. It is debatable from the standpoint of the interests of the German party whether diplomacy was appropriate and whether in this case a bad peace is better than a good quarrel. Do y'all get that? A bad peace is better than a good quarrel. In short, opinions may differ as to the expediency of any one of the methods employed to reject Bernsteinism. But that the German party did reject Bernsteinism on 2 occasions is a fact no one can fail to see. Therefore, to think that the German example confirms the thesis that the most pronounced Bernsteinians stand on the basis of class struggle of the proletariat for political and economic emancipation means to fail completely to understand what is going on under our very eyes. Let's see. Freedom of criticism defends Bernsteinism before Russian social democracy. Apparently, it has convinced itself that if we were unfair to our critics and Bernsteinians, but to which ones? Who? Where? When? What did the unfairness represent? It's because how do I explain this to y'all? It just goes back to that trade union mindset. They just want to enrich themselves. They want to, they're only focused on, what do I get or my way? And that's fine. That's all good. And I'm not trying to say it's bad, but the Bernsteinian way of thinking, like, that's where it ends, So of course you're always going to be back to square one. You're always going to be fighting for like basic fucking rights, basic wages, basic things that should just already automatically be something that we aren't fighting for. So this is why Lenin's like, dude, do away with that shit. Let's make the whole thing correct. Let's correct the whole line. You know what I mean? Let's correct the whole, I don't know. I can't think of the word. Okay. If that is the case, how is the strange fact to be explained, which always vehemently dissociated itself from all solidarity with Bernsteinism, could not defend itself without putting in a word in defense of the most pronounced Bernsteinians and of freedom of criticism, or some third persons have been treated unfairly? If this is the case, then what reasons may there be for not naming them? So again, the Bernsteinians, they could never really come out and say, like, how are you treated unfairly? Like, it's convinced itself that they were unfair, like, to who? Which ones? Where? When? What did the unfairness you speak of represent? Oh, you're just pissed because you can't, venture off and be an opportunist and still be called a Marxist, which is the same issues we still have today with people, with liberals. Okay. We see, therefore, Rabochet Diella is continuing to play the game of hide and seek it has played ever since its founding. And let us note further that this first practical application of the vaunted freedom of criticism, in fact, not only was it forthwith reduced to abstention from all criticism, but also to abstention from expressing independent views altogether. So the very Rabochet Diella, which avoids mentioning Russian Bernsteinism as if it were a shameful disease, to use Star Wars apt expression purposes, for the treatment of this disease, to copy word for word the latest German prescription for the German variety, instead of the freedom of criticism, Slavish imitation. The very same social and political content of modern international opportunism reveals itself in a variety of ways according to national peculiarities. In one country, the opportunists have long ago come out under a separate flag. In another, they have ignored theory and in fact pursued the policy of radical socialists And a third, some members of the Revolutionary Party have deserted to the camp of opportunism and strive to achieve their aims not in an open struggle for principles and for new tactics, but by gradual, imperceptible, and if one may so put it, unpunishable corruption of their party. In a fourth country, similar deserters employed the same methods in the gloom of political slavery and with a completely original combination of legal and illegal activity. To talk of freedom of criticism and Bernsteinism is a condition for uniting the Russian Social Democrats, and not to explain how Russian Bernsteinism has manifested itself and what particular fruits it has borne, amounts to talking with the aim of saying nothing. Let us ourselves try, if only in a few words, to say what Raboshe Diala did not want to say. Criticism in Russia. The chief distinguishing feature of Russia in regard to the point we are examining is that the very beginning of the spontaneous working class movement, on the one hand, and of the turn of progressive public opinion towards Marxism on the other, was marked by the combination of manifestly heterogeneous elements under a common flag to fight the common enemy. We refer to the heyday of legal Marxism. Speaking generally, this was an altogether curious phenomenon that no one in the 80s or in the beginning of the 90s would have believed possible. In a country ruled by autocracy, with a completely enslaved press and a period of desperate political reaction in which even the tiniest outgrowth of political discontent and protest is persecuted, the theory of revolutionary Marxism suddenly forces its way into the censored literature, and though expounded in Aesopian language, is understood by all the interested. So who would be the interested, right? The people that benefit from Marxism, right? The people that want to agitate the fucking state. The people that aren't just interested in bread and butter. They want, they want to zoom out. They want, they want to struggle. They want that broader struggle, that broader, they don't want to reform, they don't want to just worry about wages and work conditions. The government had accustomed itself to regarding only the theory of the revolutionary Narodnaya Volya as dangerous without, as is usual, observing its internal evolution and rejoicing at any criticism leveled against it. Quite a considerable time elapsed by Russian standards before the government realized what had happened, and the unwieldy army of censors and gendarmes, I hope I'm saying that right, discovered the new enemy and flung itself. Oh shit, I gotta go. Okay, guys, that went by so fast. Let's pick this up tomorrow at the same time. It's 5 o'clock where I'm at, so just whatever time it is where you're at, we'll finish this tomorrow. Okay, Lennon, what is to be done? Yay! Thank you. Bye.